You know, when it comes to fantasy shows, there's a heck of a lot to choose from. Like Game of Thrones, Supernatural, Disenchantment, and others I haven't watched. It's always an interesting concept because with fantasy you can pretty much make anything out of nothing. There are worlds that are beyond ours and don't always follow the same ones. There are things that are beyond our ways of living that coexist our own beliefs and situations. And that's what I expected when I sat down and watched The Witcher, a fantasy adventure starring a monster killer named Geralt of Rivia, a show based on the video games and the books that I haven't read. And because I'm a gaming channel and I want to talk about film, I thought why not do both by talking about this adaptation. Shitting one stone with two birds, one would say. I think that's how the saying goes. Now, when I sat down to watch this show, I didn't expect much, but I was hoping to indulge myself in a somewhat compelling fantasy world full of gore, sex, adventure, and more sex. That would give me some entertainment while I tried not to think about my ever-collapsing life of schoolwork.
I see.
A show that would stay true to the source material and not succumb to forcing modern diversity politics into a story and setting that is completely inappropriate. And well, I guess I got a bit of everything. Allow me to explain. The major players in the show are Geralt, a genetically enhanced monster killer going around killing dangerous creatures for money, who's kind of an asshole, drinks a hell lot, beats the shit out of people who annoys him, and doesn't really do anything unless there's money for him. It's good to see my future self getting representation. Then you got Yennefer, a powerful mage who recklessly wreaks havoc trying to find a cure for her hurdle issues because of her hunchback. I've gone out with worse. And Ciri, a sheltered princess with unexplained magical power, whose mission is to find Geralt while trying to survive the harsh world and the many people trying to capture her. And it seems simple, right? Nah. The thing is, each of these characters have a timeline of their own, as they go through different situations that overlap to mean the final. Which means the show is out of place, and you'll end up scratching your head in confusion as you try to wrap your head around what the fuck you just watched. Well, my good viewer, I'm here to help and explain this show the best I can. So recline that chair that you have, and let's beat it. In timeline sense, the story really starts with Yennefer. Yennefer is a poor old farmer who has a hunchback deformity and gets beaten up because of it, and even by her own father, who basically sells her up to a witch named Tissaia. Damn, and I thought my dad was cold when he got mad at me for only crashing his car.
Run.
What?
Run.
Anywho, she then spends the next year going through intensive training at a school that may as well be bootleg Hogwarts.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Does this ever happen to you?
Anyway, she tries to do the most basic of magic, but fails to do so, and ends up being the butt of her classmates. But gradually, these failings mold her into a more capable and more powerful mage. What's that? A female character having to actually earn her power with hard work and determination? What the fuck? This isn't the Hollywood I know! Anyway, she also meets this chap, who I've forgotten already because he's as interesting as a block of dirt. And after many months, she finally gets to be called into the Court of Wizards. But she finds out they're gonna put her in a kingdom called Nilfgaard, and she doesn't like that because she wanted to go to a different kingdom. Because Nilfgaard is apparently a cesspit full of corrupt and horny kings and are pretty much the frowned on by everyone. Keep this in mind because it'll be important for later. Yennefer then goes through plastic surgery that makes her hot.
Sex.
Because of this, she ends up seducing the king of the kingdom she wants to go to. Congrats. But cut a couple years and Yennefer is still unhappy because her glamorous job isn't so glamorous after all, and doesn't think it was worth all the sacrifice she had to do to get there. And while she's running with a princess of a kingdom, she's then attacked by an assassin who wants to kill the princess and her baby because she hasn't given him a male heir. Damn, are all fathers in this universe just dicks? Anyway, the princess tries to even sacrifice her own child, which goes as well as a seminar teaching white people they're all racist. The child then dies, and Yennefer has to bury it, and this sudden realization on life makes her want to have a baby on her own. But she can't because they took out her baby maker. You know, you can adopt, right? Now we focus on Geralt, who travels around the place and gets asked by different people to kill monsters, only to discover that the monsters are less to blame than the general population. Themes of real monsters being greed, ambition, and hatred of men? Wow, you're just blowing my mind, screenwriters. Anyway, Geralt then goes to the feast in Cintra where he meets Kulif, the Queen of Cintra, who is presented as a strong, hardened, and calculating queen that acts as her own war general and fights her own battles on the front line. Who isn't afraid to get her hands dirty even though she has the physique of a middle-aged woman who looks like she can barely open a jar of pickles, let alone a sword. But it doesn't matter, she takes no shit from any man, even insulting a lord like a child who's arranged to marry her daughter to form a peace treaty technology that could possibly save lives from war. And this pompous and childish action would most definitely not compromise that. Anyway, she asks Geralt to do things because she expects a fight to break out, but he's like,
Nah, it'll be fine.
Then all of a sudden, a surprise knight comes into the court demanding for Ciri's mother's hand in marriage, who I honestly thought was Ciri till the 4th episode because they look no older than 10 years old of age. And look the exact same. Anyway, the knight calls on the law of surprise, which is a nice way of saying, I save your life, you pay me back with whatever you have on that you own. Kind of like a loan, but more driven by destiny and doesn't gain on interest. Anyway, the knight turns out to be cursed to look like my neighbor across the street. And because everyone has monkey brains, they start attacking him and the Witcher joins in to break the fight. The hedgehog-looking guy then asks Sintra for permission in marriage, who responds by stabbing him. Damn, that's a weird way of saying yes. But she's stopped by her daughter, who can somehow cast magic bullshit now, without any training. Okay. They then get married on the spot, and the hedgehog fucker turns into a human fucker, and the human fucker begs for the Geralt to take something, but Geralt's like, nah. But he insists, so he agrees to the law of surprise, which in his case means he has ownership of their child. What the crouton? I get trying to repay him back, and it's the most honorable thing to do, but why the hell would you make such a ridiculous claim like that on your child? This is like fixing your plumbing for free, and they offer you their wife. Why the hell would you trust this random stranger that you just met with your future daughter? Why would high upper class members offer something so little significance to him but major for them when they probably possess a mass fortune as they are the future king and queen? Also, what do you think a Witcher would do with a child? The things Geralt does are dangerous and nonsensical. Do you really think that that's a great environment for a child? What is he, Rumple fucking Stillskin? Maybe if you ask kindly, he'll give you some golden straw. Geralt, of course, isn't happy about this and says fuck it to it and doesn't want anything to do with it. But everyone's like, nah, it's your destiny, mate. You gotta do it. And now he's conflicted with it. Man, I love how they use destiny as a wild card whenever they need a reason for something to happen in the plot. Like, the writers don't give a shit about free will for characters. They do things because it's their purpose. Brilliant work. Real motivation of free will is for pussies. Geralt then meets Yennefer in the hopes of curing his bad dreams of his so-called destiny, which results in a genie getting loose. But both of them gradually bond together after saving her. That becomes a little more touchy for say. Oh yeah, give me
Sick.
But eventually are torn apart when she finds out Geralt made a wish from the genie. A wish so Yennefer would be in love with him. Which is kind of fucked up if you think about it. You're basically taking someone's free will and twisting it to your own. Well, I guess the writers can relate to this. Anyway, she finds out and she pisses off, leaving Geralt to go claim his claw of surprise. Why now? Have no fucking clue. We then get to meet Ciri, the estranged princess who plays poker in the streets. Fuck it, I'm going with it. Anyway, Geralt comes by Sintra to finally claim the child, and he sees the advancing army of Nilfgaard, a kingdom that wants to destroy liberate other kingdoms for some reason. Anyway, Geralt tells them they're not safe, but Kulif is like, nah, it'll be fine, have a cheeseburger, and gets sent to the dungeon by her spineless husband, who says he supports her because she was able to get through bad times of murdering innocent elves. Count then leads her forces to the battle with her on the main line, and what the Chris Pratt are you doing? This has to be one of the dumbest moves in tactical history. Hey, here's a little question to ask you people. Do you ever wonder why generals and leaders are often on the sidelines of battle? It's because if they die, it leaves the army clueless of what to do. By staying on the far lines, they can bark orders so they can basically win the battle. Medieval battles are unpredictable and are pretty much suicide at the point. It's not hard to get killed in one of these things.
Fuck.
And of course her spineless husband is badly wounded and killed. Derp.
Oh my, who could have seen this coming?
Fuck.
Anyway, now Sintra is fucked, so everyone decides to kill themselves, like jumping out of windows. I think I do it better. So Geralt breaks out of prison and Ciri is then taken by one of the leading generals of Nilfgaard, but then loses her because she screams at him. Good thing this guy isn't a babysitter or he's fucked. Anyway, Ciri finds an elf friend who I don't know the name of, and then comes upon a forest full of elves and another black elf. Yeah, you'll see this as a pattern in the show where there are just a bunch of ethnically diverse people scattered throughout the show that doesn't geographically make sense, seeing as it's more of a Northern world, but, you know, you gotta tick those diversity quotas somehow. Anyway, Nilfgaard is advancing more and more on the continent, and the Court of Wizards are worried about this and tell everyone that they need to stop this or they'll destroy them. Pretty standard stuff, really. But a mage from Nilfgaard comes in and somehow convinces the majority that Nilfgaard is in war with Centra and not with anyone else, and they're only there to liberate others for their cause. Yes, liberate. I'm sorry, what does liberate mean again? Set someone free from a situation, especially imprisonment or slavery, in which their liberty is severely restricted. Yeah, that checks out. They take a vote and they vote on doing nothing, which was a bad move, because you know what they say, you give a girl a ring, she's gonna want your house. So Desea is forming a bunch of rogue mages to fight them, and they fight but pretty much lose all their forces. Great start, chaps. And it's only when Yennefer sacrifices herself and uses fire magic that she wipes the Nilfgaard army. And then Geralt finds Ciri and it's all happy and jolly, and then Ciri gets a vision of Yennefer, and that's it, that's season 1 for you.
Sex.
So, what do I think? Well, I went into this expecting gore, nudity, and not asking much from me. And, well, I was right about the gore and nudity. There is so much crap in this show that if you blink, you'll miss the entire point. As I said, it doesn't help that the whole timeline is all jumbled up, putting episodes that should be in the beginning in the middle of the season. I'm pretty sure they did this to make it seem complex and highlight on future events, and to show how fucking smart they are. But this kind of method requires finesse and writing skills that uses patience and good narrative storytelling to grab the audience's attention. Things that this show lacks in the concept. You're required to retain a lot of information to understand the key factors going on, and well, it's all just disorientating. It asks too much right off the bat, and I feel like this would scare most people off. I also implore you to play a drinking game in this. Drink every time that this show mentions destiny. I swear you'll be passed out in 10 minutes. Character choices don't mean jack crap when you have a fortune cookie telling you you'll meet someone new and interesting. And let me tell you, stoned out Millie from Red Lobster isn't what I consider interesting. I know that in their world, there's a lot of mystical things happening, and prophecies are bound for the course, and destiny is a good way of putting the end-all goal and conflict right out in the open. It gives us a sense of what to look forward to, and I understand that. But they can tone it down with this hippie bullshit sometimes. Give the characters and audience a chance to breathe in what they have to handle, rather than constantly shoving it down their throats to the point where they're throwing up mac and cheese. And trust me, it happens more than you think. Then there's also Jaskier, the traveling bard that follows Geralt on his adventures, who I can't figure out if I like him or if I hate his guts. He's supposed to be the so-called comic relief who generally spouts out exposition like an old M2 radio. So in a way, he's supposed to act as the perspective of the audience and give the show some levity in the cases of seriousness. But all he manages to do is make me want to hit my head against a table. Don't get me wrong, sometimes he's funny, but then mostly he isn't.
Like a genie? The floaty fellas with the bad tempers and the band magics, that kind of genie.
You have the most incredible neck.
Take it back, and then you can have your ginny gin gin.
Like a sexy goose.
Oh, you usually just let strangers rub chamomile onto your lovely bottom.
Are you perhaps short of a marble?
Oh, Valley, penis!
Hey.
He acts too much like a modern person off the street, opposed to someone who actually be in this environment. He's always given some kind of quippy comment or acting like a complete moron in serious moments, and basically reacting to things like this is the first time he's ever been in the Witcher world, which makes him stick out like a sore thumb. I'm just saying, you could tone him down a bit, and in a lot of these moments with him, he completely pisses me off because he basically takes the plot and situation and pretty much butchers the hell out of it. And if you're wondering why I never mentioned him in my sum up, it's because he didn't have much impact on the plot. And when he did, he completely cock-blocked the story. I wanted to like this character, but he's so fucking extra that it pisses the nips out of me. We also don't really get to learn much about him, or what his past is. I mean, shit, besides him making an ass of himself and sleeping with people's wives, I barely know anything about him to grasp to, which only makes me infer that the writers only made Jaskier so they can giggle like schoolgirls. And one of the biggest problems of me in this world is its own world building. The thing with fantasy is that the world which it lives in is a very, very important thing to establish, because we don't know the rules or the history of the world. So armies start fighting out of nowhere, cities burn, Jaskier existing, people jump out into windows and more. Like, why do people want Ciri so bad, and why are certain elves casted out while some are working with humans? These are questions that the show fails to establish. It's that certain context that makes the show feel flat and confusing. The show eventually gets its shit together and explains some of this, but it takes too long to do this, and doesn't really have a good bait and reel to the audience to keep it going. That being said, it's a certain context that allows us to feel for the situation of the story, and without it, it feels bleak and confusing. The surroundings don't help either. You never really have a sense of where anything is. It's either bleak or on shite, with it buildings, scenery, and even clothes all look alike. It's just a bunch of locations that Geralt or other characters go through that has no real impact or feelings on you, and you end up feeling lost and disinterested. I have no idea what the context is, so I feel nothing when big moments happen. A show that does this well is Game of Thrones. Ask any Game of Thrones fan where anything is, and he'll be able to point it out faster than my English teacher in my writing. Every location is different and distinct to the lighting, to the scenery, and even to what people wear. My point is the show isn't distinctive on where anything is and how the world works. I have no sense of who and where people are because they can pretty much be from anywhere. And it also doesn't help that the show likes to shove a bunch of other races together to be more ethnically diverse, because they couldn't think of a good way of fitting all that message quota in, so they just said screw it and did it anyway. And for a show about killing monsters, the CGI is a pretty hit or miss. Some look great, but then you have ones like the Golden Dragon and this thing. And it's probably because the budget was quite small for this first production, but generally this show works with its budget pretty well, having some beautiful scenery and locations that I'm assuming are real locations to save on the budget. Also, on a side note, this is a personal gripe with me. I find it weird that with a show full of magical creatures, that none of them actually do anything for themselves and fight back better. These are magical creatures that have super strength and super enhanced magic, while humans are the definition of bleak and powerless, and should most definitely dominate them all, but you know, whatever. Henry Cavill as Geralt is probably one of the biggest highlights in this. He perfectly portrays Geralt physically and emotionally as a hardened, cold yet skilled killer who really doesn't question the morality of what he does, but he still has a bit of humanity under all that he does. And whenever he goes up against monsters, he always tries to refrain from fighting when it isn't necessary, and believes in promises and oaths even when it's against him. He's the kind of person who cares about the people around him, but has a hard time showing it because of the harsh experiences and the environment of the world, and it's portrayed throughout the show. However, Geralt feels more like a side character to Yennefer, who is given a lot more screen time in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, I like Yennefer. She's a complex and well-written character with an interesting arc. From an abused, powerless maiden to a strong and demanding mage, to a jaded and lost individual looking for redemption and purpose, and lastly to a hero willing to lay her life for others. It's great stuff, really, and I appreciate the writers going more in depth with her. However, when you have a show called The Witcher, you would expect the main focus to be on Geralt the Witcher, who feels as if he's being dragged to the next objective by another character or plot point. Ciri is probably the weakest out of the tree because she's more of an objective. There's a sort of mystery around her of where her powers are coming from, and that's pretty much the only thing on her that we have to actually have an insight on her. We don't really have an insight of what she's like or who she is, which she kind of improves in the second season, but I'll talk about that more in part 2 of my review. Now, you might think I dislike this show, but I actually generally enjoyed it for the most part. What I like about this show is the fact that it incorporates a sort of shroud of mystery. It makes you want to learn more as it goes on, and interesting characters that really complement the themes and dialogue. You can tell the people involved care and respect the material they are given, and it shows as the show embraces those same elements, which is why I see it to be so promising. However, the story is so convoluted that it kind of ruins the story, with barely any grounding to keep the story up. I'm assuming a lot of the storylines were taken from the books, and while it's good to stay true to the source material, I'm worried that they might rely on it too much. Because once they don't have any books to copy and paste from, they end up breaking the established plot points because they don't know how to end it. Kinda like another show. Honestly, I do see potential in this show. There's a good story buried beneath this all, with all the good elements that do so. I do implore you to watch this, as there is some good stuff in it. But this isn't a show you briskly watch as you're doing meditative yoga. You really have to immerse and invest yourself and to really enjoy it. And whether you think treading through 8 hours to get it is really worth it is really up to you and your commitment. The point with all of this is The Witcher is a flawed yet promising show that has a lot to offer. You just have to dig it deeper and you can find it. And while the story is pretty bleak, the characters are far from it and have an interesting dynamic going on. It really feels as if this show is more of a backstory for these characters that's leading to up to something more bigger, which is a really risky move to start a series. I just hope they can deliver that in season 3. So does season 2 live up to that hype? Well, you'll just have to find out in part 2 when I decide to make it. Or you can watch the show and form your own opinion. Either way, come back and watch part 2. Anyway, that's about it. So long and piss off, my friends.
Talking about The Witcher? We gotta talk about sex.